There is a particular kind of loneliness that Dostoevsky understood better than anyone. It is not the loneliness of being physically alone. It is not the loneliness of having no one to talk to. It is the loneliness that comes from seeing too clearly, from understanding too deeply, from perceiving what others cannot or will not see. You wake up one morning and realize that the conversations you once enjoyed now feel hollow. The people you once felt close to now seem distant, not because they moved away, but because you can see through the masks they wear, the games they play, the lies they tell themselves. You see the contradictions they refuse to acknowledge. You feel the unspoken tensions they pretend don't exist. You sense the desperate performances they mistake for authenticity. And this seeing, this clarity, has become your curse. Because once you see clearly, you cannot unsee. Once you understand the depth of human self-deception, you cannot pretend you don't. Once you perceive the invisible architecture of denial that holds most relationships together, you cannot unknow it. And so you find yourself alone, not because you chose isolation, but because clarity chose you. You didn't ask for this gift. You didn't seek out this burden. But now that you have it, you cannot return to the comfortable blindness you once lived in. The question that haunts you is simple and terrible. Why must seeing the truth cost me everything? Why does clarity feel like a punishment? Why am I being punished for being awake when everyone else is allowed to sleep peacefully? Let me tell you something that will change how you understand your loneliness. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. Dostoevsky knew this truth in his bones because he lived it. He spent years in Siberian exile, surrounded by murderers and thieves. And there he discovered something that most people never learn. The person who sees clearly is always alone at first. Not forever, but at first. Because clarity is the first stage of a transformation that most people will never undergo. You are not cursed with clarity. You are blessed with it. But blessings often feel like curses in the beginning, before you learn to carry them with grace. What you call loneliness, Dostoevsky would call the sacred solitude that precedes rebirth. What you call isolation, he would call the necessary separation from illusion. What you call being cursed, he would call being chosen for a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. Throughout all of his novels, Dostoevsky returned again and again to a particular type of character, the one who sees too much. Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, lying in his tiny room, tormented by thoughts that others never think. Ivan Karamazov in The Brothers, Karamazov, whose brilliant mind leads him into darkness because he cannot stop questioning what everyone else accepts. The underground man, who sees through every social convention and finds himself paralyzed by his own insight. Prince Mishkin in The Idiot, whose pure perception of human nature makes him seem naive to those who have learned to lie more skillfully. These characters were not fictional inventions for Dostoevsky. They were mirrors of his own soul. They were explorations of the terrible price of consciousness. And through them, he showed that clarity is both a gift and a burden, a treasure and a torment, a doorway to truth and a sentence to loneliness. But he also showed something else. He showed that this loneliness is not the end of the story. It is the middle chapter, the difficult passage, the dark night that precedes a different kind of dawn. Here is what Dostoevsky understood about clarity. that you must understand too. Clarity does not separate you from people, it separates you from illusions about people. And there is a profound difference between these two things. Most human relationships are built on a foundation of unspoken agreements. I will not see your darkness if you don't see mine. I will not question your contradictions if you don't question mine. I will not challenge the story you tell yourself about who you are if you don't challenge mine. These agreements are invisible. No one speaks them aloud, but they form the glue that holds most connections together. We call this intimacy. We call this friendship. We call this love. But Dostoevsky knew that it is actually collusion. It is a mutual agreement to remain unconscious, to stay comfortable, to avoid the discomfort of truth. And when you develop clarity, you can no longer participate in these agreements. Not because you are judging others, not because you think you are better, but because you can see the agreements now. And once you see them, you cannot pretend you don't. You notice when someone is lying to themselves about their motivations. You feel when a conversation is more about performance than connection. You sense when someone is using you as an emotional mirror to confirm their false self-image rather than actually seeing you. And this perception makes you dangerous, not because you intend harm, but because your presence threatens the comfortable illusions that most people depend on for their sense of stability. Dostoevsky wrote in Notes from Underground that consciousness is a disease. He meant this literally. The more conscious you become, the more you suffer. But he also meant something deeper. Consciousness is a disease that forces you to leave the herd. It makes you unfit for the shallow connections that satisfy those who still sleep. It separates you from the easy camaraderie of people who share the same comfortable delusions. But this disease is also the only path to genuine human connection, because once you have been cursed with clarity, you can no longer settle for false intimacy. You can no longer pretend that surface-level conversations satisfy your soul. You can no longer participate in relationships that require you to be less aware, less honest, less alive than you actually are. And so, you find yourself alone, sitting with a truth that no one around you seems to see, carrying a weight that no one around you seems to feel, living in a reality that no one around you seems to inhabit. This is the loneliness of clarity, and Dostoevsky knew it well. He knew it in the prison camp, where he was surrounded by people, but utterly alone with his thoughts. He knew it in the gambling halls, where he watched people destroy themselves with mechanisms of denial he could see, but they could not. He knew it in his own family, where his epilepsy and his spiritual searching marked him as different, strange, too intense for normal life. But here is what he also knew. The loneliness of clarity is not permanent, it is transitional. It is the space between leaving false connection and finding true connection, between releasing the many shallow relationships and discovering the few deep ones, between the loss of comfortable illusion and the discovery of uncomfortable truth. You are in the wilderness right now, and the wilderness is lonely, but you are not lost. You are being refined. Dostoevsky believed that suffering is the crucible in which consciousness is forged, and loneliness is a particular type of suffering that forces you to confront yourself without distraction, without escape, without the comfort of collective delusion. When you are alone because of your clarity, you face a choice that Dostoevsky explored in every novel he wrote. You can become bitter and cynical like Ivan Karamazov, using your clarity as a weapon against the world, judging everyone who doesn't see what you see, retreating into intellectual superiority that protects you from vulnerability. Or you can become compassionate, like Alyosha Karamazov, understanding that most people are not refusing to see the truth, but simply haven't yet developed the capacity to bear it. That their blindness is not moral failure, but psychological protection. That their comfortable illusions are not evidence of weakness, but of a different stage in the journey of consciousness. This is the great fork in the path, and Dostoevsky knew that how you respond to the curse of clarity determines whether it destroys you or transforms you. If you let clarity turn you hard, cynical, judgmental, you will remain alone forever, not because others reject you, but because you have rejected the possibility of connection with anyone who doesn't match your level of awareness. You will become like the underground man, brilliant but bitter, perceptive but paralyzed, seeing everything but unable to love anything. But if you let clarity make you tender, compassionate, patient, you will discover something extraordinary. You will find that there are others like you, not many, but enough. Others who have been cursed with the same clarity. Others who live in the same lonely landscape of perception. Others who cannot return to comfortable blindness no matter how hard they try. And when you find these people, something sacred happens. A recognition so deep, it feels like coming home. A connection so real, it makes all the false connections of your past feel like shadows. A communion of souls that have each walked through their own darkness and emerged with the same hard-won clarity. Dostoevsky called these encounters the meetings of the conscious ones. In The Brothers Karamazov, when Alyosha meets the other seekers of truth, there is an immediate recognition. They do not need to explain themselves. They do not need to justify their way of seeing. They simply know each other on sight, the way soldiers who have been in the same war recognize each other without words. This is what awaits you on the other side of your loneliness. Not a return to the shallow connections you lost, not a healing that allows you to unsee what you have seen, but the discovery of depth of connection you never knew was possible. Relationships based not on mutual illusion, but on mutual truth. Not on avoiding each other's darkness, but on helping each other carry it. Not on comfortable agreement, but on honest seeing. These relationships are rare. Dostoevsky knew this. He wrote about them as precious gems scattered across a vast desert. You might go years without finding one, but when you do, that single true connection is worth more than 1,000 false ones. It is worth the loneliness you walked through to reach it. It is worth the clarity that separated you from the crowd. It is worth the curse that was actually a blessing in disguise. But there is something else you must understand about the loneliness of clarity. It is teaching you something essential. It is forcing you to develop a relationship with yourself that most people never develop. When you are alone because others cannot meet you in your depth of perception, you are given a rare gift. The necessity of becoming your own companion, of learning to sit with your own thoughts without needing someone else to validate them, of trusting your own perception even when everyone around you sees things differently, of finding stability within yourself rather than in the approval or understanding of others. This is what Dostoevsky meant when he wrote that man must learn to stand alone before God and truth without the support of collective belief. He was describing the essential task of consciousness, the move from being defined by the group to being defined by your own encounter with reality. And this move is always lonely at first. It must be lonely because if it were comfortable and supported by others, you would never truly make the journey. You would carry the group's definitions with you. You would import their blindness into your new awareness. You would contaminate your clarity with their need for you to stay the same. So, the loneliness serves a purpose. It strips away the false supports you were leaning on. It removes the crutches of collective validation. It forces you to stand on your own feet, to see with your own eyes, to think with your own mind, to feel with your own heart. And yes, this is terrifying. Yes, this is painful. Yes, this makes you question whether the clarity was worth the cost. But Dostoevsky would tell you that the alternative is worse. The alternative is to dull your perception so you can fit back into the comfortable blindness of the group, to unsee what you have seen so you can belong again, to sacrifice truth for connection, awareness for acceptance, consciousness for companionship. Some people make this choice. Dostoevsky wrote about them too. Characters who glimpse the truth but cannot bear the weight of it. So they run back to illusion, back to the crowd, back to the comfortable lies that everyone agrees not to question. And these characters always end up more alone than before, because now they are alone even from themselves. They have abandoned their own perception, their own truth, their own soul. And that internal abandonment is the deepest loneliness of all, far worse than the external loneliness of being separated from others who cannot see what you see. So, if you have been cursed with clarity, if you find yourself alone because of what you perceive, if you wonder whether it would be easier to just go back to sleep, remember what Dostoevsky knew. Once you have woken up, you cannot truly go back to sleep. You can pretend. You can numb yourself. You can distract yourself. But the clarity remains, haunting you, calling you, refusing to let you rest in comfortable illusion. And so, you have only one real choice: to move forward, to walk deeper into the clarity, even though it is lonely, to trust that the loneliness is not punishment, but preparation, to believe that on the other side of this wilderness, there are others who see what you see, and more importantly, there is a version of yourself who has learned to carry clarity with grace instead of bitterness, with compassion instead of judgment, with love instead of cynicism. This is the path Dostoevsky himself walked, from his exile in Siberia to his struggles with addiction and debt, from his epileptic visions to his spiritual crises. He walked through loneliness that would have destroyed most people. But he emerged with something precious, a clarity about human nature that could perceive both our darkest capacities and our highest possibilities, a compassion that could extend to murderers and saints alike, a vision that could see through the lies we tell ourselves while still loving us for trying. And he gave this vision to the world through his novels, his letters, his life. He transformed his curse into a gift, his loneliness into art, his suffering into wisdom, and he showed that this is possible for anyone who is willing to walk the path of clarity without turning away, without numbing out, without giving up on the possibility of true connection. You have been cursed with clarity. This is true. But curses and blessings are sometimes the same thing, depending on how you carry them. The loneliness you feel right now is not the final destination. It is the wilderness you must cross to reach the promised land. And what is the promised land? It is not a place where everyone suddenly sees what you see. It is not a world where your clarity is celebrated and understood by all. It is something simpler and more profound. It is the discovery that you can live in truth and still find connection, that you can see clearly and still love deeply, that you can be awake in a sleeping world and still experience genuine intimacy with the few others who have also awakened, that you can carry the burden of consciousness without becoming bitter or closed, that you can be cursed with clarity and blessed with it at the same time. This is what Dostoevsky offers you, not a solution to your loneliness, but a path through it, not a way to eliminate the curse, but a way to transform it into a blessing, not a promise that everyone will understand you, but a promise that you will find those who do. And when you find them, you will realize that the loneliness was worth it, because now you know the difference between false connection and true communion, between shallow intimacy and deep recognition, between belonging to the group and belonging to yourself and those few others who live in the same depth of consciousness that you do. So, walk forward into your loneliness without fear. Dostoevsky walks with you, though you cannot see him. Everyone who has ever been cursed with clarity walks with you, though you may not meet them for years. And your future self walks with you, the self who has learned to carry this burden with grace, who has discovered that clarity is not a curse at all, but the beginning of a more authentic way of being human. You are not alone in your aloneness. You are walking a path that the greatest souls have always walked, the path of the one who sees what others cannot see, who knows what others do not know, who bears what others cannot bear. And at the end of this path is not more loneliness, but a different kind of connection, deeper, truer, rarer, worth every step you took through the wilderness to reach it. If you recognized yourself in these words, if you know the loneliness of clarity, share in the comments which insight resonated most deeply with you. Your words might reach someone else who is walking this path alone and needs to know that they are not the only one. Subscribe for more explorations of Dostoevsky's wisdom about the human soul, the cost of consciousness, and the path toward genuine connection in a world of comfortable illusions. And remember what Dostoevsky knew in his bones. The curse of clarity becomes a blessing the moment you stop fighting it and start walking with it. Thank you for your presence here. See you in the next reflection.